Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 7 and we are going to present our discussion is about analysis of novel. First of all, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Yuli Utami and my student number is 52, and then my friends Choerunnisa Nur Amalina, the student number is 53, and then my friend Firis Winahyu and the student number is 54. The title of our novel is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Next is synopsis of the story. George Milton is a man who is small but has good intelligence, while Lenny Small is a big man but has a childish nature. Lenny likes soft things like dress and animal fur. Therefore, he often carries mice in his pocket and accidentally kills them. They are friends who have been traveling together for a long time. One day, they were on their way to their new workplace, a farm. On their journey, they talked about their dreams of wanting to have their own home, having a farm that would support them, and Lenny wanting to have his pet, a rabbit that he would take care of every day. When they arrived at the farm, George reminded Lenny not to say anything later because he didn't want Lenny to get into trouble because of his stupidity. George and Lenny finally met Curly. Curly didn't like Lenny because of his large body and he was jealous of Lenny for having a large body while he didn't. One day, Lenny accidentally injured Curly's hands and he was very angry about it. But for the persuasion of George, Slim, and the others, he finally forgave Lenny even though he was still vengeful with Lenny. One day, Lenny met Curly's wife. George emphasized to avoid Curly and his wife, otherwise they would get into trouble. But because Lenny had a soft heart, he listened to the story of Curly's wife and struck his head. However, he accidentally broke the neck of his wife, Curly, because of his great strength and made her die. Lenny was afraid that if George knew all this, he would be angry with Lenny. Eventually, Lenny left the farm and went to the place George had been talking about when they got into trouble. In the end, George, Curly, Slim, Candy, and Carlson, who also worked on the farm, knew that Lenny had killed Curly's wife and they wanted to find Lenny. Lenny, who was in the hiding place, was frightened if George would be angry with him and he cried. Suddenly, George came and said that they had to leave to make their dreams come true and Lenny happily accepted George. He said he would go everywhere with George and Lenny to go walking in front of George. However, it turns out George took out his gun and fired it at Lenny until Lenny finally died. George didn't want him to always get into trouble with Lenny, and he didn't want Lenny killed by others, so he decided to kill him with his own hands. Next is plot of the story. Plot of the story. The first is initial incident. When the writer tells us about of Lenny and George going to their new workplace and talking about their dreams of wanting to have their own home, having a farm that will support them, and Lenny has a rabbit who will be his pet and he will take care of it all the day. And then the second is rising action. When Lenny accidentally injured the hand of Curly, who was the son of the boss where they worked. He threatened to tell people that Lenny had hurt him, but George, Slim, and the others persuaded Curly not to tell the others, and finally Curly obeyed. but he still has a grudge with Lenny. Third is climax. The climax is when the writer tells us about Lenny accidentally kill Curly's wife with great power. Lenny then left Curly's wife to go to the hideout that had been told by George when they got into trouble. And the fourth is falling action. The falling action is when George and the others look for Lenny and George met Lenny alone. He told Lenny that they had to go to the place they had dreamed of in the form of a house that had a farm and rabbit that would become Lenny's pet. Fifth is denouement. When George shot Lenny with Carlson's pistol and Lenny finally died. George said that he didn't want to always get into trouble in his life because he was with Lenny. He also didn't want if Lenny was killed by someone else. Therefore, it is better he would kill him his own hands. Next is settings. The first setting is place. The first is south of Soledad, California, is the name of the city. And then the second is the bunk house, when all of the workers stayed and live. Then the third is the barn, is place for crooks live and the place when Lenny killed Curly's wife. And then fourth is Salinas River, is place when Lenny and George told about their dream and place when George killed Lenny. The second settings is time. The first is afternoon, is when George and the other find Lenny, and then the second is night, when Lenny and George talk about their dreams and when George killed Lenny. The third is situation. The situation is tense, especially when Lenny accidentally injured Curly's hand and when Lenny accidentally killed Curly's wife.
And the next is characters and characterization. The first is Lenny, static protagonist. He has a foolish nature and likes of things, so that he always depends on his best friend, George. And he also always messes up to hurt someone even if by accident. Second, George, dynamic protagonist and antagonist. He has a passionate spirit in life and always understands his best friend, Lenny. But he also has a selfish nature. Since when Lenny has a big problem and he did not want to get involved, even he had the heart to kill his friend. The third, Carly, static, antagonist, has a selfish nature, likes to bully his employees, and vindictive looks when he is angry and he wants to see that Lenny was the one who killed his wife. The fourth, Carly's wife, static, antagonist, has a coercive nature and not a good woman. She always makes trouble that will bring destruction to other men or like a bad woman, prostitutes. The fifth is Candy, static protagonist, has a caring nature for others, since when he is sincere friends with George and Lenny. They also dreamed that they could live together. The sixth is Carlson, static antagonist. He was jealous of others, especially Carly. The seventh, Slim, static protagonist. He believes that Lenny is not evil. He also understands that George killed Lenny because he was told by Carly and Slim to also comfort George in his misery. The eighth, Crooks, static protagonist. He is one of the victims of the bully from Carly because the color of his skin is different from the others. The next one is theme. The first is friendship. The theme of friendship can be seen from the main characters, where has formed a strong friendship between George and Lenny. They complement each other. George always protects and understands Lenny, who has stupid habits, and finally he will solve the problem. The second is humanity. Besides containing the theme of friendship, the story of mice and men also has a theme about humanity. It can be seen when they work hard but they don't get the right salary. They also often get bullies from Carly and are discriminated against by different skin colors and often compared to their intelligence.
The next is point of view of mice and men is told from the viewpoint of the omniscient third person, as the author tells the story using character names. For example, in the first sentence is Lenny droned to himself softly. George lay back on the sand and crossed his hand under his head, and Lenny imitated him, raising his head to see whether he were doing it right. And the last sentence is they held walk in single file down the path, and even in the point one stayed behind the other. Both were dressed in denim trousers and in denim coats with brass buttons. Both wore black, shapeless hats and both carried tight blanket rolls slung over their shoulders. And for the next is moral value. And the moral value from this story is sometimes dreams are not meant to be attained, but they are still meant to be strived for. We should respect each other because every human have a weaknesses. Do not discriminate because it can harm others, and actually every person has the same opportunity in all fields. Okay guys, and the last is closing. Thank you for your attention and may you get the benefit from this presentation. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.